You're listening to the Wired for Impact podcast.
All right, I'm here with Tim Shields. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
Awesome. Well, you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit over the years here. We connected in the Joe Dispenza community. I've mentioned Dr. Joe, several times on the podcast, and you have a very interesting relationship with him. Actually, I do want to lay out really quickly before we get into all of that. My intention for this call today, if you're listening, is Tim has a very, very fascinating and informed perspective on consciousness and what limits people from reaching higher enlightened consciousness. So those stuck points, those blocks, what we call core wounds. And so we're going to get into that a little bit in this call, but to give you a little bit of a landscape about who Tim is and his connection to some of the higher thinkers and leaders in this space, i.e. Joe Dispenza. Share with us a little bit about your background and how you got connected with him.
Well, I could start in so many places, but I'll just start with, I guess in 2010, I went to my first workshop and there was maybe like 100 people or something like that. Now he sells out 2,000 people in 5 minutes with 1,000 people on a waiting list. But my sister kept standing up there, and at the end of one of the sessions, he's like, I want to talk to you. She's like, oh my God, what did I do? And she's like, he's like, what's going on with you? And she's like, oh, I hurt my back sleigh riding with my kid. And he's like, all right, well, let's go find a room and I'll do an adjustment. And it turned out that before I was born, my family lived one town over from his family in New Jersey. So we just, people outside of New Jersey, they were like, you went to Alfonso's? I went to Alfonso's Pizza Place. So we just totally connected. And he invited us to be his guests at dinner that night. And I didn't remember this, but my sister told me, a couple of years after I was working with Joe, when I left that weekend, I said, I'm going to work with that guy someday, because I was sitting there with my jaw dropped because I've been writing about this stuff since I was 17. But he gave me a completely new toolbox of language. At that time, I was trying to put out my first book, and he was trying to find an agent for me, but he couldn't track her down. So we stayed connected. Every year, I'd go, maybe once a year, go back to a workshop. And then in 2000, probably 15, I went to like sort of my first advanced workshop. And the whole time I was meditating on a full-time job and a mentor, because I was always freelancing. And every time a job ended, I had to change my energy, focus, on work and everything. So I was beating myself up because I'm like, I'm not doing this right. Everybody's having these profound internal experiences. So then as soon as I landed in Seattle, I opened my LinkedIn and somebody sent me this, it was supposed to be the next unicorn company coming up between Apple and Android, 110 million in funding and all that stuff. This guy's like, you really got to apply to this job. We need a writer. And I was like, that sounds interesting. So then I take the light rail into Seattle and I run into him on a street corner. He's like, you really got to apply to this job. And I said, okay. So I got the job for 6 months, every day before work, anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half. I went to a coffee shop and I worked on the first draft of this book that I was stuck on called A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium Experiment. So at exactly 6 months, I got laid off, and I was like, yes, because I had just finished this draft. It took me 6 months. At the moment I finished the draft, I got laid off, and I was like, I'm just going to work on this all winter. And I was so inflated with just, psyched that I was finally on this path where I was actualizing instead of just thinking about being a writer and doing my own stuff. I walked out of the building that day and I went like this, and I just looked up and I said, what amazing thing's about to happen to me? And literally within 3 minutes, I got a text from Dr. Joe Dispenza's assistant. And she was like, he's in the Middle East, but he'd like to talk to you about helping him edit his blogs. Wow. So I started editing his blogs, and about 9 months in, he asked me if I would be interested in helping him with Becoming Supernatural. And I literally said to him, watch how fucking fast I quit my job. So I quit my job and I've never gone back. But so I was his editor for 6 years, which meant I was basically talking to him in a one-on-one way for 6 years to help plan, edit his blogs, all that stuff. So essentially he was my mentor, and I could ask him questions that, you probably want to ask him at a workshop. So anyway, that kind of that was how we intersected. And, he's been one of the greatest teachers of my life because since I was 17, I was writing about this stuff. So,
Yeah.
and 17 is a pretty important age for me.
Yeah, we'll get into it in a second. Just for those that may not be fully aware of Dr. Joe Dispenza, the book Becoming Supernatural is one of his best-selling books, and it is beyond this world, what it gets into and what the human body is capable of. Dr. Dispenza has a worldwide community that, as Tim mentioned a second ago, goes to his live workshops. And I've been to a number of them, and people show up in wheelchairs and they leave walking, if not running. And that's not an exaggeration. I have experienced and witnessed firsthand people having extraordinary healings, from cancer remissions to infertility, all of a sudden, a woman having a child, other health issues, relationship issues. I mean, it's an incredible, profound experience. And I'm really big on not necessarily putting people up on pedestals. And yet, on the other hand, we do want to acknowledge what somebody's created. And you said it perfectly, that he's a teacher. And for someone like yourself and myself, we're students of life. We are constantly seeking out new perspectives, new information, new ideas, challenging old belief structures, et cetera. So it's a tip of the cap to what Dr. Joe has created and the community that he has developed. Of course, the body of work, the healings that he has inspired in hundreds, if not thousands of people, if not maybe even millions at this point. But anyway, what a unique opportunity and experience for you to have worked with him and had those more intimate one-on-one conversations with somebody who's demonstrated a very high level of impact, which is awesome. So tell us a little bit more about core wounds. I want to get into that. Let's zoom out a little bit on a macro perspective and just look at humanity as a whole. Walk us through what you've discovered about where people get stuck, why they get stuck, and how they can get unstuck.
Well, I mean, I think the foundation is awareness, and most people are walking around unconscious. And, I define core wounds as the deeply painful, deeply emotional, deeply branded events of our childhood. And for whatever reason, our awareness attached to these. So instead of it being a pain of an event, it becomes the pain of the event, which continues an unconscious string throughout our lives. And the most obvious place where these pop up is in our family, but really the biggest impact I find is in our romantic relationships. So, I mean, I guess I'll just jump right into this. But about 2 summers ago, I was traveling through Europe for 2 months, and I was kind of going back and forth with this ex-girlfriend, and she was actually at a Dispenza event in London. And I've co-opted the term quantum string for my own purposes. And quantum string is something where it might be something like hearing your favorite song or seeing your childhood dog, or it's something you're in your external world that collapses time right to an inciting incident. So we had this conversation, and I'm walking through this park in Hamburg, and I'm just like listening to music, and I'm a little bit sort of, you know, worked up inside.
Mm-hmm.
And this quantum string opened up, and I saw this core wound going all the way back to fourth grade. I was at this birthday party with a bunch of kids I didn't know. I was like small, but like super athletic, and I was just dominating everybody. And this is so silly, but this girl walks up and she's like, "You're so ugly." And I was like, I just tried to brush it off as a fourth grader, but I was like devastated inside.
Hurts, yeah.
And then there was like Dorothy Schoner in seventh grade who kissed my best friend, and then that continued to happen.
Fucking Dorothy.
And so I saw this core wound, this quantum string collapse to a time.
Let me make sure I understand that. So when you were in, where did you say you were at? Europe?
I was in Hamburg, Germany.
And you saw the quantum string. What exactly do you mean? In your mind's eye? And your
it's just it's you don't see it. It's just this awareness that comes
it brings
in.
an awareness. Okay.
Yeah, it brings a greater awareness.
And it connected you back to some childhood core wounds.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
And then on day 59 of 60, I was walking along this path in Croatia along the water, walking through all these tourists, and she was in London at the time texting me, and she was kind of in a lit up space and I was sort of in a contracted, like in my mind space. And I was walking through this path and I asked myself the question, why every time when she texts me does my sort of internal life go into chaos? And probably 10 steps later, the answer was returned to me. And it was because I hadn't forgiven myself for the way I had treated her. And so I call that was like sort of my first double quantum strain. So the first one was what happened, and then the second was what happened as a result. And I was very selfish, and it was, it was about me and my path and not a good partner and all that stuff. And when this awareness came in, I just started bawling, and I had my sunglasses on, a hat, and I'm just like snot running down and I'm just trying to book through all these tourists and I don't know where I'm going, and the macadam ends and I just keep walking into the woods. I find this little rocky beach and I just lay down, and my heart starts racing, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like in that anxious panic moment. And my body wanted to get up, but some voice told me to just be still. And I started saying this Saint Germain mantra, I'm the violet flame made manifest to heal the world. I started saying it, and by the third time I stopped and I was like, holy shit, I got it all wrong. It's it's not I'm the violet flame made manifest to heal the world. It's I'm the violet flame made manifest to heal myself.
Mm.
And so it was I also, another kind of core wound is around finances, and it was like my dad sort of, we lost our financial security when I was younger. So it's like you need the awareness to see where these come from. And then you have to overlay another level of awareness to see how that has been affecting your life.
Hmm.
And once I think you see those, just through the power of consciousness and awareness, you can begin the process of untangling them simply through awareness and intention.
Yeah, I have found that people that are relatively new to this whole concept recognize that there may be a pattern in their life that is ineffective, that they don't desire, that's dysfunctional. Perhaps the most obvious one that always comes to my mind is like somebody that's dating somebody and they keep dating the same type of person, even though the person switching out, the type of person doesn't change, and it's painful and it's hurt. It's like why am I having this sort of Groundhog's Day experience? And so the recognition of a pattern starts to become so painfully obvious because it is painful. They realize at that point in time, oh, the common denominator is me. So what is it about me that's somehow attracting or continuing to create this type of painful experience? And that to me is the breadcrumbs of, oh, let's go deeper into the psyche. Let's uncover what is in the subconscious. I think of it in terms of like a tree ring. If you were to cut a tree down and you look at all the rings on a tree, right? If you took
Absolutely.
that tree when it's a sapling and you took an axe to it and you hacked it, there would be a wound. There'd be a core wound at a young age. And then let's say that tree grew over the next 50, 60, 70 years, and then you cut that tree down, you would be able to see the wound of that sapling in the early stages of those rings, but you'd also see reverberations of that wound all the way out possibly to the fully mature tree where there might be a knot or some type of scarring on the outer exterior of that tree. And that's how I think about or wounds where people are noticing that there's a blemish in my life, metaphorically speaking. And I don't know why. Like, where is that? Where is that coming from? What are some of the core wounds that people deal with that are the quote unquote, like more universal core wounds that perhaps most of us or all of us deal with?
Yeah, well, first of all, brilliant metaphor. I love that. And just to add to what you said, I was walking along this bridge in Florida this summer, and a definition of intelligence popped in, and it was 5 words. Intelligence is the ability to recognize patterns. So it's exactly what you were saying. It's like, and I've seen it in myself, like the women that I have gone for, I would say the last 3 relationships were the most important of my life. And the first two, they were mirrors of my unworthiness and, my lack and all that stuff. And because they were mirrors of this, like one of them I just thought was the most beautiful person in the world and way out of my league. I'm like, what's she doing with me? She's going to find out, whatever. Like I'm not enough. And then the other one was this super, super privileged woman from great financial means. And that brought up my lack. And because the external world, and especially our relationships, are mirrors to our internal world, it's like that's who I became and that's what I projected. But it's not me, it's just this core wound that is being projected out into the world. We're not our core wounds. I don't know, we're divine beings with great powers to transcend all this stuff, but it's almost like these core wounds become the North Stars. They are the teachers of your life that you are supposed to uncover. And, I think that personally, like, I think we come into this world to evolve spiritually. So we obviously have free will, but we choose these lessons that we want to uncover. And, the only way we can do that is in this third dimension of contrast, of polarity. Our emotions and our feelings are what create that contrast. So, emotions and feelings are the driving force of humanity. And on the negative scale, they create Hitler and armies that destroy stuff. On the positive scale, it creates Jesus, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah, just a little blah blah there, little diatribe there.
Dude, it's fascinating. I love what you said about core wounds being a North Star. So often people, to your point, first and foremost, aren't even aware that there might even be a core wound there. They're walking around essentially unconscious to the spiritual opportunity available to them through growth. But even when they do maybe identify the core wound, it becomes very, very difficult. And so they push it away, they resist it, they justify, not addressing it. They project it onto other people and say it's their problem. There's such a empowering position that somebody can take when they fully embrace that the core wound is the direction to head in. If you're talking about spiritual growth, if you're talking about, which I think might be the whole point and purpose of this earthly experience is to grow spiritually. So those core wounds really do become a North Star. It's interesting to me. I don't know if you're willing to open up a little bit about this, but like with your relationships, I find relationships too are the greatest sources of our pains and our joys. But the romantic, intimate relationships are the ones that are uniquely designed to bring those core wounds to the surface. And it's interesting when you talked about being in a relationship with somebody and you felt a sense of mirroring in the low self-worth, because men and women operate so differently. And it's sometimes very difficult to see somebody's behavior as a reflection of your own when you're the opposite sex and you have a completely different life experience, et cetera. How did you acknowledge and see and become aware of the fact that there was a mirroring of the lack of self-worth in that relationship?
Well, I mean, it could go all the way back to fourth grade. Like I'm ugly or something like that. It's so ridiculous, these little things that our mind and our ego connects into. But, going back to your tree metaphor, I think that there's like a sponsoring thought underneath this stuff. And yesterday I was, there's this in the Indian land here, this sacred land. And I kind of, in the process of creating this book, this course, I didn't know what I was writing about. And I would sort of get to an end of a chapter and I'd get a little anxious and I'd go for a walk. When I'm working on a project, I'd go for this walk almost daily. And I mean, I get up there and it's like downloads of information. And yesterday I was walking around there and I was like, God, why do I feel so uneasy today? And I feel anxious and I started sort of going down and I was like, I have this invoice to pay. And I mean, it's not that much, and I have plenty of money. But I kept going down and I was like, and I kept asking myself, oh, what's beneath that? What's beneath that? And then it came into my awareness. I'm like, oh, I'm in the process of negotiating the biggest opportunity of my life and dealing with lawyers and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, and then that goes all the way back to my self-worth too. And I always I've done all this stuff on my own. Like I haven't really had proper representation, especially when I'm working with somebody. Um, so I feel like I have a very hard time articulating my worth. And then when they work with me, they're like, oh, wow. So it could be a story like I get taken advantage of and all that stuff. We all have all these stories. And again, I'm sure they go all the way back to
Hmm.
core wounds and stuff. But again, I think it's just coming down to awareness. But so many of us are so busy in this machine, and especially at this moment in time, it's like
Yeah.
people are focusing on trying to put bread on the table and pay for their kids' diapers and all sorts of stuff. And I'm kind of in a unique position where I remember this moment I was like in this park on the corner of Seattle. I think it's called Coleman Park, and you're looking out over the Olympics and everything. And I just sort of said or thought out loud, I was like, man, I just want to like walk around, think about the mysteries of the universe, and get paid to write about it. And that's actually what I get to do.
Hmm.
So I'm in a unique position but also as a writer, it's an introspective journey, and I've always been
Hmm.
that person. So if you are uncomfortable or in a place where you are not happy in life, you have to look deeper and what are the patterns that are keeping me in this? Because reality is malleable to our consciousness and our will. I said in this course, it's like when you finally get the courage to move in a direction, when you have the alignment of the mind, body, and spirit, and you start to move in that direction, you become like the boring machine, and matter starts to conform to your will. And the feedback mechanism is serendipities, synchronicities, the right people showing up at the right time, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm. You're talking about manifestation, really. Since you're talking about that, can you share with us how you go about manifesting? Let's say you have a shitty relationship or you're wanting to fatten your bank account, and experience more abundance. How do you go about manifesting?
Well, part of my daily practice since 2010, which is when my mother passed away, and I had like a sick decade of parents. So while my friends were going on vacations, I was going home to New Jersey to see my parents. So my mother was kind of fading away from Parkinson's and dementia, and I'd been mentally preparing myself for years. And then when she actually died, it was like the rug was swept out under me, and I felt completely ungrounded and lost and scared. Um, and I talked to a friend of my sister's who's kind of like an energy healer type person, and she said, "Okay, you're a writer, yeah. All right, I want you to do this exercise every day. I want you to write down 5 things you're grateful for and 5 things you want to create. And you're going to find that the things you create today are going to be the things you're grateful for in the future."
Mm.
And I was like, okay, I'll try anything. And at the time I was unemployed. I went home to say goodbye to my parents. I came back, and the ad agency I was working at was like, sorry, your job's not here anymore. And I was like, excuse me? So I was like walking around Seattle for, 2 months waiting while my mother was in hospice, like
Mm.
just completely lost in my head. So I started doing this exercise, and as soon as I started doing it, everything started happening. And it was like I got the perfect job for the perfect time, which paid me. Like I said, it was a 3-month contract, and then they extended it 6 months. And I said, okay, but at 6 months, I'm taking off. So I always knew if I wanted to have big things to write about, I had to have big experiences. And travel has been one of those ways to do it. So I bought a one-way ticket to India, as any normal person would. And I was just doing this gratitude and intention exercise. And, at the end of 6 months, this boss was like, would you be interested in working like 20 hours a week while you're traveling? I was like, hell yeah. So I was making American, US money over there. And, another thing I wrote in there was like, I want to be of service while I'm traveling. And I wind up connecting with this guy who's won the equivalent of 2 Nobel Prizes in grassroots environmentalism, India's most important environmental lawyer, sued the state of India for 20 years to create a green zone around the Taj Mahal.
Wow.
For a bunch of years, the Supreme Court held special cases for him every every Friday. Um, and I had enough money to travel for maybe 4 months, and I was just, writing this stuff down, and it was happening and it was manifesting. I was also meditating every day, and I think meditation keeps us sort of in the alignment of mind, body, and spirit because again, it comes to awareness and it's so easy for us to get out of that alignment. And it's like the mind pulls us this way, the heart pulls us this way. Our spirit or energy is like, I have this dream that's pulling me this way. So
Not to
it's
mention
about
survival instincts.
and
I gotta
survive.
eat.
Yeah,
I gotta get this bill paid. I got the mortgages. Yeah, the kids are
exactly.
crying. I gotta feed them. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is one of my practices I do almost every single day. I did it this morning since 2010. And it actually became sort of the story arc in my first book. So every like 3 year chapters, I actually put stuff from my gratitude and intention journal and I took off to find the story and the gratitude and intention journal created that story arc.
Hmm.
And people who have read that book reach out to me and they're like, I started doing this exercise. You're not going to believe what happened. I'm like, yeah, I actually will. I will.
Dude,
So
that's a powerful hack right there. If you can even categorize it as that. I know Dispenza talks often about when he talks about manifesting, he talks about elevating emotion and having specificity of thought, essentially, and that the elevated emotion, we are electromagnetic beings, and that the elevated emotion creates like it's kind of like you're a Wi-Fi signal, and you're sending out higher bands of frequency, if you will, waves of energy through your love, through your gratitude, and then that your mind gets specific on what you want to manifest. And that specificity is information that is carried on that wave, the particle carried by the wave itself.
mhm,
And so it's interesting to hear you say that your process is gratitude and part what you seek to create. Because to me, what that says is like elevated emotion. You're
mhm,
elevating. I'm assuming you do the gratitude first as you're writing those down.
yep,
You're connecting to a heart space, and while you're in that elevated emotion, you then shift your thought to, well, where's my target now? Where am I send this loving energy with specificity? And you have a list of what you want to create. And is that not the model for manifesting?
yeah. I to go back to 17 and why it's such a powerful thing. So
Yeah.
this first book is about the dream of the 17-year-old self. And then this new work is actually me talking to my 17-year-old self
Mm,
and teaching him everything I've learned about consciousness. And it's called The 13 Keys. The book is going to be called The 13 Keys, a memoir from the future. The course is called The 13 Keys, a new model for living, dreaming, and creating. What I realized was I was desperately seeking mentorship and I didn't know anybody who wanted to be an artist or a writer. And at 17, like probably a lot of people's stories start, I took a huge dose of mushrooms at a Grateful Dead concert. And it was like sort of the first time I experienced unity consciousness. And I
mhm.
was like, whoa, whatever this is, it's so much bigger than me. I would say it actually altered my trajectory. And then 17 is when I first started keeping a journal. And also the third pillar of this is I wanted to be a writer so bad I started asking to be used as an instrument of peace. And then, adulting and everything happens, and I was sort of swept up in the dot-com bust, and I was like chasing IPOs in New York. And then I moved out to Seattle. And then probably around 35, I was like, wow, I used to ask to be used as an instrument of peace. And I started doing that again. And then boom, I wound up connecting with Joe Dispenza.
Mm.
So, I think this is for anybody, but especially an artist or something. Surrender and trust is a huge piece of it as well. And I also have one of the keys is about in this course is about breadcrumbs. And breadcrumbs are something that I define as like that leaps from your external world into your awareness. And you just kind of take note and you're like, well, that's weird. Seeing a number or a color or something you just read reflected. And on its own, a breadcrumbs means nothing. But then they begin stacking upon each other.
Hmm.
And through that stacking, you start to see a pattern and you start to see a path. And I make a lot of probably decisions that most people are like, that's crazy. But I'm like, I don't know, I'm following this internal guidance system. And yeah, so I mean that's a huge part of all of my work, surrender and trust, because that's what I'm trying to master in this life. And I also, you know, I realize that I'm trying to convey the information that I wish somebody had given me as a young man.
Hmm.
And this is kind of funny and weird, but maybe to some of your audience, but maybe not to others. I'm surrounded by a lot of like very powerful women who are very connected, and they'll give me information and I take it in. So the other day I started teaching this work, just doing webinars on Sunday, choosing a topic or something, and I was talking about core wounds. And that morning, this woman reached out to me who I hadn't spoken to in like 4 years. And she's like, I keep getting messages for you. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I'm doing this teaching today. Hop on and we'll talk afterwards. And she basically said afterwards, your audience is sort of, I don't know even what Gen Z is. It Gen Z? I don't know what we're on, but it's like, these 25 to 35-year-olds, and she said specifically men. And it's funny because I connect better with women. I've always, I mean, I can bro down if I have to bro down, but I always, I was kind of raised by women and two sisters who are, the closest people to me. And but it really makes so much sense that this might be I mean, I think my audience is everybody, but it's like she was saying these new kids that are coming in, they're already aware and awake, but they don't know which way to go and all that stuff. So the 13 keys is kind of, from Columbus to Magellan to Lewis and Clark, every great journey has required a proper set of tools to address the possible challenges along the way. And what is a
Hmm.
tool? A tool is simply a key that opens and unlocks the doors of challenges. But we've explored the external world. The new frontier is within. We've gone from the Newtonian paradigm, which is the external, the movement of large forces, to a quantum paradigm, which is the internal. And when I was younger, I was like so anti-science. I was such like an idealistic artist and writer, and I thought the way out was, through psychedelics and transcendence. But really, the way out is the way in, especially at this moment in history.
Mm.
It's like there's so much misinformation out there, information warfare and everything. And the only way to sort through that is to go within and attach to that moral compass and that spiritual fiber that is the greatest power and technology there is. We've been systematically pushed into this materialistic paradigm from science to consumerism. And, you know, I was just listening to this Russell Brand interview this morning, and he did all
Mhm.
that stuff, and he's like, it was hollow and vacuous. And what really matters is your internal connection to a higher source.
Mhm.
So I try to live my life like that, and through that, you are guided from probably the path that would be very well. In my case, I could have had a very easy life and secure life staying in advertising. I'd probably be an alcoholic on my third divorce and have cancer or something like that. But I mean, I felt that calling since I was 17, and every time I tried to get off the train, like I came back from living in Mexico when I was 45 and had a broken heart with this, super privileged woman. And I was like, screw this shit. I'm just going to Amazon. I'm going to make a ton of money. And every time I try to do that, life just kicks me off that train and puts me right back on the writing train.
Mm.
So I have to just surrender and trust this path. And the last year has taught me patience. And I maybe 2 years, and I had the book and I was ready to go, and I'm just like, what the hell? And then my agent got sick and he actually passed away in December. And but because of that pause, I wound up turning the book into a course, which forced me to think of it in a completely different way. And in that process, I've developed new language. And then now I'm also teaching it. And when I go back, I'm talking to an agent right now. When I go back, like I'm gonna have to update a lot of stuff because I have a whole new sort of set of language.
Mhm.
But from I said in the first book, like the dream of the 17-year-old self is like shooting a grappling hook out into the future. And if you're strong enough, focused enough, and determined enough, you're gonna get there. But the environment is always gonna try and knock you off the line. So I'm just trying to stay on that line and, trust. And I mean, it's working out. So,
What would you say is the top one or two keys that you would tell your 17-year-old self? What are the tools that a younger you needed that you didn't have that the older you now is sharing with him, but also the world?
good question. Well, I mean, my mother wrote me this letter in college, and it's in my first book, and it's like, don't be in such a rush through the future. It comes all too soon, and it's going to sort itself out. And if I could have, I mean, you have to go through the process of life to develop wisdom through experience. And, I mean, I could have, maybe I wouldn't be so gray if I could have just trusted and understood all that. But, you know, that, and then thoughts are energies, and thoughts are what creates the external reality. So I remember my mother, spoke through sort of a Catholic paradigm, and she would be like, I can't remember. I'm so removed from it, but it was like, be aware of your thoughts. You can sin in your thoughts and all that stuff. And how I see it now is it's sinning. If you want to use that word, there's a better word. I don't know right now, but you're sinning against yourself when you're beating yourself up. And I mean, anybody that knows me knows that I'm very hard on myself because I expect a lot out of myself.
Mhm.
But I'm trying to learn self-forgiveness as well. And you know, it's just the process of life.
Do you feel that those wounds that you've experienced are some of them still fresh in the personal development space, in this consciousness space that I've been in for a while? It's like there's a difference between somebody who has a core wound that is very, very sensitive. It's obvious, you can see it, like they get triggered, they react versus somebody who I know a guy who leads a whole organization on how to be better fathers, and he tells a story about how he was abandoned as a child multiple times by his biological father and then a stepfather, and then how his own son, when he finally was feeling like finally I'm going to be able to be the father that I aspired to have in my life, and his own son died as he was a stillborn. And he shares this story, and it's so gut wrenching and
Wow.
so um, beautifully painful. But he shares it from a place of anchoredness. And so, as deeply wounding as that is, um, he's healed it to the point where he can share it publicly and teach others with it. Do you still feel that there are some core wounds that are raw, or do you feel like you've healed them? And if so, how did you go about healing them?
I mean, I don't know if I would say they're raw. As far as the relationship one, I'll have to tell you once I get into another relationship. But I hope I have the awareness to be vulnerable and just be like, this is who I am. There's a lot of shit down here. And I'm human and all that stuff. But in this teaching I was just doing last Sunday on core wounds, I sort of talked about how, there's two strands of DNA, and we come into this life and we inherit the genetic imprint, or the genetic structure of our parents, but there's also an energetics that goes all the way back through time. And we could call that probably generational trauma at this point. But, if you think about these two strands of DNA, and I drew it on a board, and my mother her father was an alcoholic, and um, she made a lot of excuses around that. Oh, he had sciatic and all that stuff. But she gave me a lot of fear and probably loneliness. She was an only child, and I talked about the soul lake in my first book. I talk about the soul lake, which is
Mm,
this profound loneliness, but it's also
mm,
a North Star if we uncover that. And then my father, if he was alive, he would be 101 this July, and he was the third day in Normandy, Purple Heart Bronze Star veteran. I
mm,
found out at his funeral he was the only person that survived this attack on his squad. So, if you think about, he would have had survivor's guilt. And I didn't even know about this until after he passed away. And what is survivor's guilt? Survivor's guilt is unworthiness,
mhm.
and that's in energetics. So those are sort of the two strands of DNA that energetically come into my life that I have to disentangle to find my own sort of, to repair my own DNA, if you will,
Mm.
into my own wholeness.
That's such an interesting analysis. about the DNA structure and how you have the two strands, and of course you have the what do they call them? The is it a helix? The
Yeah, the double
ladder
helix.
steps basically
Yeah.
to connect the two.
Which is
That's
kind of interesting. I had just read that morning that when they connect, it's like a spiral staircase. So
hmm
it's almost like you come down this spiral staircase that they laid out, and
hmm
then you have to walk back up to find yourself.
Dude, that's so trippy. There's so many there's so many tangents and ideas and concepts that I have heard around this that blows my mind about how there's literally a signature of God in the double helix. Literally how it spells out Yahweh or whatever. It's wild. You mentioned a second ago about soul aches, which I love that term. It's a powerful, profound term. But the soul ache of loneliness and how that's a North Star. I know a lot of people struggle with loneliness. There's certainly times in my life. It's January here in St. Louis where I'm from, and it gets gray and rainy and cold. And every year I just get this like, oh God, get me out of here. January,
Come
February
on to Palm
struck.
Springs.
Yeah, well,
You're welcome to come.
careful what you wish for. I might show up.
Yeah.
With like the 13 keys, how would you address a deep level, soul ache level of loneliness?
Well, again, I guess I would, it's almost like a spiritual technology. And like I keep going back to the North Star, but I'm not really sure how I transcended that. It's almost like I just kind of outgrew it. And maybe it is through the path of me self-actualizing myself as a writer. I mean, I live a little bit of an isolated, it's like gay men and retirees out here, a lot of them. So not exactly the best place to find a woman, but it's an incredible place for me to focus. And when I'm in a project or something, like I don't like to say I'm a channeler. I like to say I'm a code breaker. And my personal mission statement, one day I was running along the beach in Oregon and it just like dropped in. And it's I translate light frequency and energy into story so as to lead others to their truth. And when I'm like writing and I tap into that, I notice like my head kind of cocks and it's like I could probably start drooling out of but I'm listening to almost my higher self dictate this stuff to me. And it's like I'm sometimes I'll be writing and I'll just like slam the desk like holy fucking shit. Like I can't believe I'm writing this right now. But it is sort of the electricity of aliveness that comes through. And some people can get that in relationships. I get it through writing. Some people can get it through painting, I mean, running, whatever, but it's like, I don't know. Maybe it's just, I here it is. I think that soul ache is our disconnectedness from source and from God, from the engendering energy that from nature, especially. We're so disconnected from nature
hmm
these days. And first of all, recognizing that, and I think it's opening up a relationship with this engendering energy and knowing that you're not alone. And again, when you open up and start asking for things, it's like you have to have a higher level of awareness because things start showing up in your external world. Every day, we probably get hundreds of signs. But if we're driving to work and we're locked in our mind about what we're going to, say to our boss or something, we're not going to see that road sign or talk to that person in the coffee shop that might hold a key to what you've been trying to unlock in your life.
That's what's so scary about our culture and our environment today is just the constant input of information of data. You got these freaking cell phones that are attached to the hip. And it's so fascinating to watch like my own children grow. They're both teenagers, and there is no downtime. They think that they're doing downtime when they're scrolling. And let me be personally transparent. I mean, I do the same thing too, right? Like
Of
I
course,
lay in bed and look at the stupid videos or whatever.
always.
But like, um, I recognize that there are times where like, man, I haven't given my brain a space to just do nothing.
Yeah,
So even in those downtimes, it's just I'm constantly tuning into something. And when you're constantly tuning into something, you don't ever have an openness to let something tune into you, perhaps.
yeah,
We grew up in an era where, you actually had to be bored. You remember that when you
yeah,
were a kid and you're like, I'm bored. And they're like, what do you want? You're sitting in the back of the car. We're on a 5 hour road
yeah.
trip. Suck it up. What are you going to do? You can't go anywhere.
Summer
Um,
starts. parents kick you out of the house. You don't come
Yeah,
home till sundown, so you got to
till
figure out
dark. Yep.
something to do. Yeah,
Yeah, and we got creative and imaginative, but I think also too, especially as we get older, like there's real communion with nature, with God, with
absolutely.
consciousness, that we're missing out on. A good friend of mine talks about how the silence is like it's like what did he call it? Like scheduled silence. He
Oh
works
yeah.
out now in silence.
Hmm.
Usually you listen to music while you're working out, or I do anyway, or a podcast or something, and he's like, no, you get those endorphins going, you're lifting weights, and you have scheduled space to just allow infinity or the universe or God to connect with you. Um,
That's
I don't know
that's
where
what
I'm
my
going with that.
well, that's kind of what my walks are about. And
Yeah.
and I do listen to music, and I might listen to like, either sort of a jam bandy thing where you get lost in that space, or
Hmm.
something with like a beautiful melody or something, because it's like when you get lost in that space, you shut off the thinking brain. And that is when the information comes through. I get so much information through meditations too. And, I just like something will come in and I'll just like put my thumb on my lap and they're like, I have to remember that idea. Or like, by the end, I
Hmm.
might have three ideas. But, the other day I was on like a co-heal and I was supposed to be focusing on somebody else, but all this information started coming in for me around the core wounds and everything.
Mm.
But then I actually reflected that back to the person. So it wasn't just for me, but, yeah, I just,
Do you
those
recall one of the
walks.
examples of that?
What's that?
Do you recall one of the examples of what one of the downloads was about the core wounds?
I mean, it was everything we've been talking about. And yesterday I went for a walk up there and I sort of got a title for what I'm going to teach this Sunday. I don't know what it is. I'm kind of doing it in reverse. I'm like, all right, I'm going to put the title out there and then I'm going to figure it out. The other times I've taught have either been something I prepared for, or um yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting every Sunday, like every week, after the call's over, I'm like, I don't want to do this again. And I'm like, now I have to think about what to do next week. But the information just comes in if I can just create the space.
Hmm.
And the mind is greater than the body, so I'm forcing myself to do it. And I get a high when I'm done, when I see people's eyes light up and, minds turn on.
Isn't that
I was
funny
like,
how much we resist and then you
yeah.
step in and you do it and you're like, this is fucking awesome. Why don't I do this more? It's
Yeah, I
so
mean all the
ironic.
time, but in that challenge there's a friction and you have to overcome that. In my new course, like I have this model of self-actualization I call the circlotron. And in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization sits at the top of a triangle,
Mm,
which would mean it's an upward ascent and you've reached some pinnacle state. But in the circlotron, it's a series of a never-ending concentric expanding circles.
mhm,
And to get from one level of self-actualization to the next, you have to overcome fear, trauma, or limited thinking. And if you're going to move from one space to another, there is friction. And when there's friction, there's a loss of energy. But there's an entropy, if you will. But the mind is greater than that friction. So you have to just keep willing yourself to do that. And it's like once you get to that next level of self-actualization, in that vacuum that exists in the previous is a whole new body of experience and knowledge and wisdom to get to the next outer circle.
mhm. Such a fascinating concept. Have you had anybody go through your course yet? Do you have any examples of transformation?
Well, I guess the guy who was like building my funnel and everything like that, he's completely lit up and he's like, I started doing all this stuff and he's like, you're teaching me so much stuff, like just by doing it and jumping in, you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to know the roadmap, you just have to keep moving into it.
Hmm.
So he's like started to create his own course around money and stuff like that, which he'd just been thinking about it for a long time. Um, Actually, the people that filmed the course, they wound up breaking up. So key 12 and key 13 are about love and relationships. And I remembered when they were filming it, I felt their energy so intensely.
Oh,
They
wow.
were so locked into what I was saying. And it brought up a lot of things for them. And so his endorsement was like, if you don't want to break up, don't take this course. But but really they obviously weren't healthy to begin with. But you will get, I think you'll see these things through another relationships and everything else through another prism. And, you know, I'm teaching all this stuff through the prism of consciousness, which is everything, which is what we're all connected to. We're just a fractal, a part of the whole trying to experience itself within this.
Hmm. What's some of the insights that you shared in the love and relationships keys?
Well, love attracts love, wounds attract wounds. That was one of them. And really, I talk a lot about my own core wounds in that one in key 12. Um, oh, sorry, key 13 is core wounds. Um, but I kind of, there are these two that really go together. I think it's 10 and 11 and the breadcrumbs. And I wound up, Thrive and Thrive 2, the films by Foster Gamble.
I know of them. I haven't seen them.
Okay, well, Thrive 2 came out while I was working on a project in like Santa Cruz. And I was, pretty moved by it. And at the end, it was like, if you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to reach out. And actually, the P.O. box was in Capitola, which is where I was living at the time. So I just
Hmm.
wrote him a little card, sent it off, didn't think anything of it. 6 months later, I was in Hawaii with my girlfriend, and I get a letter from Foster. And he's like, we are having a group of like-minded people. Do you want to come be our guest? And at first I was like, oh, it's so far. I don't live there anymore. And then I was like, what am I talking about? What am I thinking about? And it happened to be on my birthday. So I was like, can you recommend a hotel around there? He's like, oh no, you can just stay in our guest house. So I got to spend some time with Foster. And as soon as I walked in to his house, there was this huge piece of 3D art above me, like three-dimensional art. And I was like, holy shit, that's what I'm trying to explain in the circlotron. And then there was another piece of art. We had breakfast the next morning. He gave me this book by his mentor, Arthur Young, about process theory, which is how we come from light down into matter and everything like that. So it's a much longer story, but I sort of married process theory with the torus field. And I kind of talked about, metaphorically, how we can just surrender all of this. So the torus field is the most sort of ubiquitous and prevalent energetic structure in the universe. And it's a perfectly balanced system, regenerative and progenerative system. And the earth has a torus field, our bodies have a torus field. So I wound up sort of talking about how we can surrender all of this stuff into the torus field and have it transmuted into its opposite. But we have to be willing and I would say tenacious, staying on that intention of letting this go. And I've found sometimes it takes time, but it's just like one day you wake up and that's just gone. It's like it's been removed from the operating system. And
Hmm.
you're like, okay, I'm free. I'm liberated from that bullshit that's been keeping me back for so long.
Hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating when that happens. I'm trying to think of certain times in my life when like it really does. I mean, it's a manifestation of the internal belief,
Yeah.
and it does shed away. Like it's like a nonstick pan, It's just like, oh, this isn't part of the program anymore, and it just removes itself from your life. That's happened to me several times with relationships, friends, and whatnot, where one day just there's a shift, and
Yeah.
honestly, if I look back on those, I acknowledge that there was a transition. I could
Yeah.
feel the thought changing. I wasn't fully aware of it until it hit. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, and then when I reflect back, I'm like, yeah, that needed to shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I had
interesting how
I,
that
I
goes.
had one experience in my life that was instantaneous. I think it was 2009. It was like November 2009. Radiohead in Rainbows just came out. So I remember walking along Finney Ridge in Seattle listening to this. And I was about to go to Costa Rica for a wedding. And I had just been like, I'm a Cancer, so I love to hold on to things. So I had been like just devastated by this girl for like an entire year. And I'm just in this space listening to In Rainbows. And I was like, I can't take this energy with me to Costa Rica. I was like, how do I get rid of this? And this voice said, oh, I know, just let go of it. And with that moment, it was like the energy shot out of my chest and
Mm,
it actually almost made me fall over. And I like stutter stepped and I looked around and I'm like, did anybody else see that? And it was gone.
wow.
Yeah. It was the only time it's ever happened like that. But it was like my heart, I guess if there's enough pressure on something, it's going to blow out. And it was just like I couldn't take this, and my heart center just blew out. I never thought about the girl again.
That's fascinating. I mean, so much I think of our health, our bodily health is conflicted energy, stuck energy,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? I've
Yeah.
experienced that too, where I've mentioned it on the podcast before, a while ago, where my mother passed on, and it was a very stressful time in my life. My mother passed on. I had two uncles that passed on. My grandfather passed on. My all on my mother's side. My entire mother's side of my family died within like
Wow.
18 months. Um, my father came out of the closet. I moved states, bought a new house. I got conned, uh, had a had another child on the way. It's like so much was going on in my life.
That's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, it was a lot to process, and there was a lump on my back. And so I started stressing out about it, and I was thinking about my mom, and I was like, "Oh crap! Like, is this something that I'm gonna have to deal with? Is this some type of cancer? Is it a tumor? What is it?" And long story short, I ended up going to the hospital. I was going to work one morning, and I was so uncomfortable that I was like, I think I need to go to the hospital. So I instead of turning left to work, I went right to the hospital, and finally got to see the specialist. He came in the second night that I was there. Talk about lonely, like just sleeping in a hotel in a cold room with nobody that you love around you, not sure what your health situation is going to be. You know what I mean? Like
Wow.
you have those moments in life where it's just like,
Dark night of the soul.
yeah, I mean, it really was. But what was so fascinating about that experience was the specialist came in the next day. He said, "Look, it's benign. It's just a cyst or whatever." And the second he said that, the pain, like a light switch, went off.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
uncomfortableness. I was like, it made me so viscerally aware of how much our thought affects our body and how fear can manifest and result in pain and discomfort in the body. So, but the cyst was still there. So it was like golf ball size, kind of gross. And I decided I'm going to change the energy around it, my relationship to it, my thought to it. So my kids were young. I had niece and nephews during the summer. We'd go to the pool, and they were always like, "Ew, what is that?" They'd start making fun of me or whatever. And I just decided to turn it into a positive. I'm like, it's a love button every time you, because they were like pushing it, stuff. And they're like, so I'm like, every time you touch it, I have to give you a hug. So in my mind, I was starting to shift the energy around it, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and then long story short, I ended up going to a personal development conference. I was in this long program, and they were really challenging us to open, talking about what you were saying earlier, letting go, and receiving love. I'm always, my intuition, my intention is often to be a servant of peace, to be a servant of love, to try to help others. But receiving love was always something that I was challenged with. And
Same.
so I was in this process of really being challenged to open and to receive and to, how often we deflect with humor or, no, it's not that big. Oh, thank you. But, it wasn't me. It was really, we refer it to something else. And it was just like, no, just receive it, just receive it. And I was at a friend's apartment, and I was I was bringing up some of the frustration that I had with some of the leadership in the program that we're in, and a close friend of mine just started pouring out some love. She's like, that's your opportunity to step up and lead. You are that leader, and she just was authentically sharing some loving insight that she had on what she saw in me. And I had this moment of pause where initially I was going to be like, and I was like, no, no, just receive it. Like, and dude, the second that happened, the way that I described it then was that I felt like I was snapped into an energy vortex, like an energy, like it almost was
Hmm.
like I couldn't uh, be outside of it. Was like it snapped. I felt like I was snapped into an alignment of energy, like literally like a beam of love. And as she was saying all this stuff, and as I just was, yeah, my heart opened and received this, like instantaneously I felt water on my back, and I was sitting down. We were at my friend's apartment, so and there was a ton of us in the room, so I was on the floor, sitting on the floor, and I was leaning up against the bathroom door, and I like turned around and looked at the door thinking that maybe there was condensation on it, like somebody in the shower or something. And then I realized that, oh, the thing started to discharge. And within 24 hours, it was totally gone. And
Wow.
so it was this juxtaposition between letting go of the fear, right? But then also receiving the love. And so to me, it's all energy, and that stuck energy sort of creating a constipation of whatever in my back, to the freeing of thought, the freeing of fear, the elimination of the fear, and then the receiving of the love to get that energy flow through again. And then the body responded. It was instantaneous, and it was such a profound awakening for me to realize how we really are embodiment of consciousness.
Have you ever explored what kind of energy you hold there? You know, like
Uh,
we have grief in our lungs and
I have on my own.
yeah.
I've thought often about that because I can still feel actually. There's nothing visibly there, but I can still feel it.
Hmm.
I've had some experiences that are similar to your Grateful Dead experience, where I felt like in a past life I had been shot by an arrow, like that went
Oh,
like right
interesting.
through there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have no idea if there's any validity to that or not. But what's your suggestion on that as far as exploring? Like, how would I
Well,
find out what that is?
we'll take that one offline. But
Well,
I
I'm happy if you want to ask
well,
about it,
I just
whatever.
there's somebody that I could send you to talk to.
Gotcha, gotcha.
I actually I talked to this person. We became friends. I met her at a wedding, and she had told me in two other lives, I spoke out a lot against the authorities, and one especially against the Queen, and I was executed in two lives for speaking out.
Hmm.
And it was weird because I was sitting, this is so weird, but like I was just doing the dishes one night, like last spring or something, and the thought dropped into my mind, I don't want to be a martyr in this life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, where the hell did that come from? It was
Hmm.
like, I've never thought anything like that before. But I've never really been good with authority. So
Yeah, we have that in
yeah,
common. Yeah, I've had
we have
to
that in
learn to
common.
temper myself. Yeah. Yeah, I can get myself into trouble. I mean, we're rule breakers, like
Yeah,
I have a problem with just following rules just because. That always frustrated me as a child. Why,
yeah,
mom, dad? Because I said so. Like I need a reason. Like I'm a thinker. Like give me a reason and I'll probably follow the rule if it's
yeah,
reasonable. But like if there's no reason, or if I see that there's like uh fuckery going on, which there's a lot
yeah.
of this in this day and age, yeah, that's
Well,
to ruffle my
in this
feathers.
course, I talk a bit about the perception machine, which is the media, and they are what they want to do is exert fear to exert control. And at the end of the day, and what they become so good at it that they have us voting against our own self-interests and
Hmm.
cheering for our demise. But at the end of the day, and this is kind of with going to the thing on your back, we have two choices. It's love or fear.
Hmm.
So what are you going to direct your awareness on? We're constantly being bombarded by fear in the TV, social media, everything. But ultimately, we have a choice, and that's the power of consciousness. Where do we want to place our awareness?
I came across a quote earlier today by George Orwell, where he basically says that they want us to be fearful because fearful people you can control.
Easily.
They
Yeah.
don't want us to be going into love because there's no control with love.
No.
Um, he said it a lot more succinct, but that was the gist of it.
And love
Yeah,
is the
that's
greatest generative power there is. I mean, transmutative and generative. I was just writing this on another book I was working on, but the field our heart casts is 60 times more powerful than the field our brainwaves create.
wow.
And we can actually measure, I think, up to like 3 feet or nine feet around us. When somebody walks in the room and everybody's like that and they're just lit up,
Yep.
it's like that's their heart field, like making an impression upon the field.
That's what's so fascinating about being in the Dispenza community, because he brings so much science and technology and the latest technology to measure these things. These are not just woo-woo things anymore. There's tangible scientific data to reveal what's actually going on. I love the story that he talks about with the cancer, with the women who have cancer, and they found, I'm making this up a little bit. Maybe you know the story better than I do, but where they studied these 9 women that had these cancers, and then they studied the field, the energetic field around them, and they could see a
Yes.
certain pattern in the field. And they
Yep.
said, "Oh, the cancer creates this pattern." And then they came across the woman who had the pattern in the field, but she didn't have any cancer. And then they revealed, oh, wait, the pattern in the field is what's creating the cancer, not the other way around. Um,
Absolutely.
and how the thought and the emotion can directly replace that
Yeah.
lower frequency, conflicted friction energy field with
I
a
mean, and
loving,
that,
more coherent
yeah.
one.
And that takes us to epigenetics, which is basically, just because you may have a gene for Alzheimer's doesn't mean you're going to get it. It's the environment that turns that switch on or off, which
Hmm.
this stress is what when it comes down to it is what turns those genes on or off. And just as you can, that would be like down regulating genes, but you through our emotions, you can upregulate genes. And, you know, Dr. Toby, who's part of that community, who's one of my closest friends now, he has pain clinics and he'd been studying PTSD for all these years.
Hmm.
And our mutual friend Hillary finally got him to go to an event, and he was just sitting there. He's like, "Oh my God, how has nobody thought to research the positive effects of feelings and emotions on our
Hmm.
biology and our chemistry?"
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's that's why he says science is the new language of mysticism. It's just an endless labyrinth, and we're just at the tip of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we're going to figure out some really wild stuff in our lifetime.
It certainly feels like that. I mean, we're on the precipice. There's already stuff coming out that is beyond what we could even think in a fictional movie, almost like just the
For
type of
sure.
technology that can heal through sound
Frequencies, sound.
frequencies. Yep.
That's the next frontier in medicine.
Yep. Energy, free electricity. I
Yep.
mean, Tesla tapped into that. I love how Dispenza talks about, that what we term as material is literally 99.99999%
Energy.
space. Yeah, there's just
Yeah.
nothing there. It's collapsed energy, is what he calls it.
I mean, and the atom, the old model of the atom is not a reality. It's really just, I heard somebody call it as a possibility cloud.
Yes.
And if you start at that micro and move it up all the way up into the macro, it's like we're I explain it in this course a little bit, but there's nothing but possibility. And we're only limited by that which we can't imagine. So
Hmm.
it's like we just have to anchor ourselves in that possibility. And it's like as you do, you become the vortex that pulls it towards you. And I mean, I've seen it happen so many times in my life, and I'm always in awe when it happens. I'm just like,
It's very profound.
my friend says, don't ever say I can't believe because it negates, what you said before. But I'm in, I'm very surprised every time this happens. I'm like, holy shit,
Yeah.
like, and the things I always find that the things I are so far out there that I'm just like, this will never happen, are the things that happen relatively quickly because
Hmm.
I have no emotional attachment to it. I don't have this like fear. This has to happen so I can complete some aspect of myself. It's like you just throw your bobber out and like all of a sudden you hook something big.
That I love that idea of anchoring it in the perceived future and electromagnetically attract it to you. I mean, that to me is
Yeah.
very.
That's what this whole course is about. It's about the power of focused awareness to create your reality. And when we start to move into this, we realize that reality, the field, is actually malleable to our will. And if you were to go all the way back to when I began with like Magellan and all these great explorers, at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure they knew that their greatest tool in their toolbox was the power of their focused mind.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Fascinating, man. Well, it feels like a good place to put a bow on this conversation. For those that are interested in hearing a little bit more about the 13 keys and you, where can they go online to find you?
livethe13keys.com is the course. And for people who are listening, if they want to take it, you can use Impact 25 to get 25% off. I believe that's all caps. TheRealTimShields.com is my website. My first book is acuriousyear.com. On TikTok and Instagram, I'm the Real Tim Shields. I'm like just getting into this TikTok thing, and I'm so disorganized with social media. I'm like, how do people have time to like post every day? It's like, what are they actually doing? What are they producing? But on X, I'm Shields Timothy. I'm trying to start to use that a little bit more, but really live the 13keys.com, and for the course, Impact 25, and the realtimshields.com is my website, and it tells you a lot about kind of how I came to where I am and all that stuff.
Awesome, brother. Well, this was an enlightening and fascinating conversation. There was a lot of really powerful nuggets in here that I hope people took the time to make note of, because they really are profound and can make a huge key. To me, one of the biggest takeaways is the gratitude and the creation lists. It's a habit I'd like to start to implement myself.
Yeah.
But
It's like
yeah,
gratitude is the amplification of the wave, and then you just place your intention upon it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Fascinating, man. I also want to just quickly acknowledge you for you talked about having a lot of powerful women in your life, being
Yeah.
inspired by them, et cetera. And you do have a very beautiful, like when I think of feminine energy, to me, it's openness. And
Yeah.
those in the creative fields, and you're an explorer. You're like a consciousness explorer, and you're needing to be open to, play with these different ideas and to explore the possibilities of new ideas, and to also deconstruct old beliefs to construct bigger, stronger ones. So I see that as a really, really powerful trait of yours that I really feel blessed that you've brought to this podcast, but also to the world and what you're doing with the 13 keys, et cetera. So I appreciate you, man. And I thank you for grabbing that. What did you call it? Like lightning of energy or something like that? A line of energy.
Shooting the grappling hook out into the
Well, there's
future,
the
or
grappling hook, but there's something else where you talked about like, I think Byron Katie talks. Was it Byron Katie? Somebody talked about the creative process, and you get that idea, and you grab the tail of it, and you try to pull it down, and
oh
try to
yeah,
write it
yeah.
down before you lose it. But anyway, that like
When the muse speaks, you have to honor her. That's what I've learned.
have to,
Whether you're in the
even if you're in
shower or
a
whatever.
coherence healing, you're trying
Yeah,
to heal somebody else. You got to, yeah,
yeah,
pull it in. But yeah, thank you, man. Thank you for doing that and for laboring through that. I know it can be a lonely process. Part of that's by design, so you can focus, but
yeah,
it also could be a struggle too. I've been there, so I appreciate
yeah.
you and for
Well,
giving
I
us so
appreciate
much
you
wisdom.
taking the time. I love these conversations, and really, I think this third dimension is kind of just a game. And
Yeah.
it's here for us to learn and demonstrate our prowess as creators. And we think that reality is happening out here, but skyscrapers, telecommunications, it all started in here. So it's actually a dimension of the mind. So if you
Hmm.
can learn to control and focus your mind, and you start to get these feedbacks, you're like, oh, I'm a divine motherfucking creator.
Yep.
So I'll
Yep.
leave it at that.
I think that's where we're at right now in the world, and I think there are those of us who are recognizing the game of it and
Yeah.
realizing, oh, there is a choice. Going back to what you said before about a choice between fear and love, that choice is going to become, I think, intensified. And
Hmm.
what a time to choose love, man! What a time to, and if we collectively do it,
We
I've
could do a
tapped it.
whole other
Talk about anchoring.
podcast.
I know. I was gonna say
Yeah,
we'll
on that one.
table this part of it for another
Yeah,
conversation, but it's coming, man. It's coming.
yeah.
Well, thank you again for your time and for sharing your wisdom today. It was awesome.
Thanks, my man. Hope to see you soon. Come out to
Yeah,
Palm Springs one of these days.
sounds good, man.
All
I'll be
right.
there. Take care.
Be well.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wired for Impact. If you're interested in creating and expanding your impact, be sure to visit us online at impactnow.com.